Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. I am the guy who picked Clay Guida to defeat Kenny Florian. And I'm here to talk about the UFC 299 early prelims. There will be 5 fights on the early prelims. And I believe the main event of the prelims, so to speak, is Michel Pereira versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. Been watching these guys fight for years, and I'm pretty sure I got neither one of those names right. But I am picking Michel Pereira to win this fight. I think Michel Pereira is going to make a damn good middleweight. He's a guy coming up from welterweight, or he came up from welterweight in his last fight, taking out Andre Petrosky. And I'm aware that Mikhail Oleksiejczuk is a guy who was a former light heavyweight. But despite that, with these guys meeting in the middle here, I think the strength and physicality goes to Michel Pereira, the former welterweight. I think he's the stronger guy, and he can bully Mikhail Oleksiejczuk in tight. Of course, part of that's due to his grappling advantage, which I believe he has, as most fighters do, to be honest, a distinct grappling advantage over Oleksiejczuk. But on the feet, of course, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk is a problem for anybody. Guy's got incredible hand speed and deceptively good power, and mean body shots too. In case you got a hell of a chin on you, which Pereira does, and he really brings it on the feet. The guy's a force. But Michel Pereira's never. He's been knocked out once, the Dusko Todorovic, and I believe the fight that got him into the UFC. But that was it. That's his only knockout loss. The rest of them are all decisions. Guy's incredibly durable, and he's proven to be durable at the UFC level. Not that he's gotten his ass kicked too much, but he's been tested. Got some really good fighters, dangerous guys, Andre Fialho, Santiago Ponzinibbio, and he's never been put away. He was submitted once by an armbar 10 years ago, but I'm willing to overlook that, especially considering the matchup. I don't think Mikhail Oleksiejczuk's going to be armbarring him. And Michel Pereira has erased a lot of my doubts. I had a lot of doubts about him in the UFC. Well, he got a beautiful knockout over Danny Roberts with a flying knee, but then after that, he shit the bed against Tristan Connolly, where he wasted a lot of energy going for a flashy capoeira shit, and he was beaten and grounded by the basic fundamental skills of a featherweight in Tristan Connolly. And Pereira just looked like shit down the stretch. And then in his next fight, he got a DQ loss to Diego Sanchez, but I don't really consider that. But since then, he's looked great, Michel Pereira. Really taken away that stain from the Tristan Connolly loss, and he's looked incredible in the UFC. And of course, he's beaten some really good fighters, as I mentioned. I didn't mention Chaos Williams and Nico Price, but these are just some of the other guys he's beaten on his way up. He's an incredible fighter. And now at middleweight, I think any doubt about his cardio and whatever else is erased. He seems healthy. The guy always seemed like he was destined for middleweight anyway. If you don't believe me, go ask Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He'll tell you all about it. But that combined with the way he looked at middleweight against Petrosky, guy looked phenomenal and certainly retained that power. I really like what I see from him. And I think he's got more than one way to beat Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. I think he's got the striking on the feet, and he moves around so well. And despite being the stronger man, I still expect him to be the quicker man, or well, I shouldn't say that. Mikhail Oleksiejczuk's pretty quick, but Michel Pereira moves very well, and I think he could win that fight on the outside. But certainly on the inside, I think Michel Pereira is more dangerous, more powerful, I should say. Again, despite coming up in weight from a guy coming down, even though it was years ago, and on the ground, Michel Pereira should win. I think he's stronger, can hold him down, and he's got better submission skills. Michel Pereira, not really known as a submission artist, although he got that one rear naked choke very deep into the fight against Zeldin Imadayev, or whatever his name was. But I think Oleksiejczuk is so weak on the ground that if that's the type of fight they're fighting, where Michel Pereira is on top of him, those opportunities will open up. Where submission would not surprise me. Submission in the middle of this fight Rear naked choke I'd go with. Really wouldn't surprise me at all. But I'm aware that Oleksiejczuk's only been beaten at the UFC level anyway by some beasts. Jimmy Crute, Ovin St. Preux, and Caio Borralho. I mean, Michel Pereira may be an underrated grappler, but he's not on Caio Borralho's level. But I still think he would win that fight on the ground. And of course, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk has been TKO'd once. That was on the ground. Totally a positional ground and pound victory. A guy put in both hooks and pounded him out. After Oleksiejczuk wasn't doing too bad. He just fell apart though. But that was 10 years ago or so anyway. And again, even still, it is a loss that was due to his grappling. So I'm picking Michel Pereira to win. I bet on him at minus 150. I think he could win this fight a lot of different ways. With a gun to my head, I'd go with him winning by decision, but a submission wouldn't surprise me. I think it's there's a chance that is overlooked and overvalued thereby on DraftKings or however the fuck you bet. So I'll be looking to sprinkle on that prop maybe, but the money line is where it's at. It's the only thing available right now, and I think Michel Pereira's got more skills and should be able to win this fight. So that is the pick, and we will see what fucking happens. Next up, we have Rebellis Despaigne, I don't know, making his UFC debut against Josh Parisian. Now that one I got. Rebellis Despaigne, this guy is a killer. He's a fucking monster, gigantic, 6 foot fucking 7 or whatever. He's gigantic, and in MMA so far, he's fought for like 30 seconds. He's 4-0 and he's steamrolled everybody. One guy he got out of there deep into round 1, but everybody else he's put away in seconds. One guy in like 3 seconds, one guy in 5 seconds, one guy in like 7 seconds. I'm not shitting you. It's something like that. And I've seen these fights, not that they fucking matter, but yeah, you could just look at the record and it would tell you this guy's dangerous. He's got that danger. He's a big physical monster and he's got that danger. And he is my pick to win this fight. Rebels Despaigne, I think he has that next level danger. And I think Josh Parisian, while being a better, more versatile fighter, I can't count on him to take away the danger of Rebellis and to impose himself and make this a grueling grappling fight, to be frank. So Rebellis is the pick, but I'm not betting on it, although I'll wait to see the props. Maybe round 1 finishes at plus money. That'd be nice. But I do think if he was to win, it'd be round 1, Rebellis Despaigne. And that's despite me having seen Josh Parisian's losses, all of his TKO losses, even the exhibition, and they all take place on the ground. Although there's one, I think he lost an amateur fight that I wasn't able to see, and that was a knockout loss too. That probably took place on the feet. But regardless, as a pro, he's only been taken out on the ground. Tony Lopez in King of the Cage, Michel Batista on The Ultimate Fighter, and what's his name? Dontel Mays in the UFC. All of them took him out on the ground. All of them. And I think all of them from side control, too. Although the guy in The Ultimate Fighter was working him over every which way. But he was mauled on the ground, and it was deep into the fight. 2 of those were in round 2, one of them in round 3. No one's ever taken him out early, and no one's ever taken him out on the feet, as a professional MMA fighter. So I look at that and I say, considering that and the fact that you just look at their records and see a guy that's 4-0 versus a guy that's 15-7, that is precisely the kind of matchup that a 4-0 fighter would lose. You've heard me break down fights at this point. How many times am I just breaking down a record and going, yeah, I mean, for a guy with 2, 3 fights, 4 fights or whatever, losing to a guy with 20 fights makes sense. So it makes sense. Well, this one makes sense. It would make sense that Josh Parisian wins this fight. But I'm picking against him because I think Josh is a slower, more plodding zombie type, not really the most athletically gifted fighter, not somebody who's going to be able to impose his advantages, his skill set on Rebellis Despaigne. It could happen, but I think Rebellis would have to fall apart a little bit, where he's just round 1 doesn't work out for him, and kind of hits a wall, maybe like Shamil Gaziev, or just hits a cardio wall and yeah, falls apart completely. Or Josh Parisian maybe imposes himself, maybe actually makes some shit happen, is in Despaigne's face, and without taking any of his fight from him or cardio or whatever, just wins an MMA fight by being the better MMA fighter. I'd love to see that happen, but I'm not picking it. Again, I just think Josh is too limited athletically to open up those doors for himself. Whereas Despaigne is not limited athletically, and I think his danger is very much there for him in this fight as it has been in other fights. So, despite having never seen Parisian go down this way, I'm picking Rebellis Despaigne to win by first round TKO in one way or another. I think he's fighting a guy that's slower, plodding, easier to hit and tee off on, and with his danger, he's able to make shit happen and get him out of there early. But not betting on it until maybe the prop is available. However, I can tell you I will bet on Josh Parisian. I plan on doing some live betting if they should leave round one under any circumstances, even if he loses a fucking 10-7 round. I'd sprinkle on Josh Parisian. And also, when the props open up, I'll see what it looks like if he wins down the stretch. Because he is a zombie, and zombies are tough. And if he is able to out zombie and outlast Rebellis Despaigne and take this fight into his world, he could be that next level, that 15-7 type of fighter that, in retrospect, you say a guy like Rebellis Despaigne never should have been in the cage with him. So there's a chance we see that fight, and I'd love to see it. But again, my pick is Rebellis Despaigne. I think the danger is going to be there for him, and he's going to be the first guy to go through uh, Josh Parisian in round one. All right. Next up, we have CJ Vergara versus Assu Amabayev. I love CJ Vergara. He's precisely the type of fighter that I root for. A guy who is not the most imposing athlete, but he's got heart for days, which is not to say he's the most durable guy. It just means he'll never quit on you, like Shamil Gaziev. CJ Vergara will at least fight for your money. But he is starting to look a little less durable. He has been submitted twice, which is part of your durability. And of course, he was knocked silly by Daniel Lacerda a few fights ago. So he's a vulnerable guy, but again, he won't quit and he's got heart. Where if you can't put him away, he's always within reach of taking that momentum, turning the fight around. Go ask Clayton Rodriguez. He'll tell you all about it. Very close fight, that fight. But another fight that CJ Vergara won, and another fight he won with knees to the body. Some of his best weapons are knees to the body. That's how he took over the fight against Clayton, really hurt him there. It's also how he got out Bruno Mesquita, Bruno Correa, I believe that's his name, Bruno Correa, on the Contender Series. He got him out there with a knee to the body. And also, I thought it was his best weapon against O'Day Osborne. He had some success there. Just O'Day was able to handle him on an athletic basis, first and foremost. And CJ Vergara, I think here he's going to be handled as well. I think he's going to be handled athletically, and I think he's going to be handled grappling wise. Assu Amabayev, this guy is a monster. He really impressed me with this submission over O'Day Osborne. I knew it was a possibility, but I wasn't counting on it. But it really solidified him, in my opinion, as a dangerous UFC level grappler. O'Day Osborne's is an underrated grappler, and he didn't have anything for Amabayev. Amabayev's a guy who doesn't rely on the early finish either. He's got 9 subs. I think the majority of them are in round 2. And he's also got round 3 finishes as well, a knockout. He's been 5 rounds in a winning effort against Chris Kalides. And I just trust him overall. He's got 2 losses earlier in his career, one by decision and one by TKO in round 3 to Tagir Ulanbekov, who's a fucking monster in the UFC. But yeah, I'm picking Almabayev to be too much for CJ. I'm picking him to be able to take this fight to the ground, to be all over him, to not succumb to CJ Vergara's knees to the body or his propensity for turning the tide in a fight. I think he's going to keep control, and I think he's eventually going to suck the life out of him and hit him with a rear naked choke. I think this fight looks very similar to the O'Day Osborne fight, and I'm pretty sure it's going to have a similar result. So Assu Amabayev by decision is the pick. I'd love to be wrong about this. See CJ Vergara take this fight, especially after getting his ass kicked. It'd make for an awesome scene, but I'm not counting on it. Almabayev rear naked choke round 2 is the pick. Next up, we have a rematch from almost 10 years ago. Marina Moroz versus Joanne Calderwood, or Joanne Wood, or JoJo Wood. I believe this is JoJo's last fight. I believe she's announced her retirement, and here she's getting to close out her career by potentially getting revenge over the first girl to beat her in the UFC. Joanne Calderwood came into the UFC with a good bit of hype. She came in on the Ultimate Fighter season, whatever the fuck, the big Tournament of Champions, which ended up with Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas in the finals. But I believe Joanne Calderwood was the second seed in that tournament, taken out by Rose, who was number 7. So she had a good bit of hype even before the Ultimate Fighter, but then coming into the UFC from the Ultimate Fighter, where she looked good despite losing to Rose, and she was immediately submitted by Marina Moroz. Got her out of there with an armbar. And here she is 9 years later, whatever this is, even 10 years later, and it'd be great for her to get revenge in her closing fight, in her final fight. But I'm not picking it to happen. I'm picking Marina Moroz to win, and I'm actually picking her to win by submission. I know Marina Moroz isn't known as the greatest submission artist out there, but she's always been underrated. She's only gotten 2 sub wins in the UFC over Joanne Calderwood and whoever the hell else, Agapova last year, who's dog shit on the ground. But the reality is Joanne Wood, is weak on the ground. She may have patched up some holes and gotten better, but it's still the biggest hole in her ship. She's the girl who, when she fought Alexa Grasso, I picked Grasso to win. I don't know if I picked Grasso to win by submission, but I know I bet on it. And Grasso had never submitted anybody before. But I just knew that's the biggest hole in her ship. And if you're going to sink her ship, it's with that hole right there. And I think that's the case here. I know these guys, these women, are both known as point fighters in victory or defeat at the UFC level. So it seems like counting on a submission is stupid. But I do think it's still her biggest weakness, Joanne Wood. And I think Marina Moroz is underrated there. Marina got her from the guard the first time, but I also think if she was on top of Joanne Wood, a lot of submission opportunities are going to present themselves, just like the rear naked choke to Alexa Grasso. But even more than the submission, which I think the submission is likely, I'm sure Marina Moroz wins. I'm counting on her to win. I think she's a very good striker as well, could handle the Muay Thai of Joanne Wood. Not that she can handle it where Joanne has nothing for her, but where Marina Moroz is very much in the fight. And I also don't have a lot of faith in Joanne Wood's mentality, to be honest. She's a girl that is on her way out. Whether this is her last fight or not, I know she's talked about she's talked like she was retired, and here she is. I mean, she's going to be ready to go Saturday night, but I think she's got one foot out the door, and Marina Moroz does not, despite posting half nude photos of herself all over the internet. But I'm picking Marina Moroz to win. I think she is going to be too much for Joanne Wood. And despite the money line not being great, minus 230, I've thrown a little bet on that. I could see Joanne Wood, this being a tight decision, and Joanne Wood being that seasoned fighter that grinds out a decision. But even if you told me this fight went to a decision, I'd still favor Marina Moroz. I think she's a technical match for Joanne Wood, and I also think she's in a better state of mind. Not that I'm somebody who harps on state of mind or whatever, but when I do, it's usually because there's doubts, and there's doubts in Joanne Wood. So Marina Moroz winning by submission is my pick. I'm thinking if the fight's going her way, there will be options for her, and I've got her winning on top this time and taking Joanne Wood out with a submission of some sort. Call it a rear naked choke, round 2. We'll see what happens. And the final fight of the breakdown here, and I believe the first fight of the night, is going to be Felipe Lins versus Iwan Cutelaba, which could be a very good fight because Iwan Cutelaba's in it. Iwan Cutelaba, one of my favorite fighters because the guy is pure intensity. I'd say he's the most intense fighter in the UFC, certainly since Diego Sanchez is no longer here. And he's also one of the most exciting fighters. Great kill or be killed, glass cannon type of fighter. It's not to say he can't go the distance because he has in winning efforts, losing efforts, even in a draw. But he is in general, a violent kill or be killed type of fighter. And his biggest weakness is his submission defense. He's been knocked out a few times, but his submission defense is his biggest weakness. And he's been tapped by some really good fighters at the UFC level. But Felipe Lins is not the biggest submission threat, despite being Brazilian. He's not the biggest submission threat. He's much more of a TKO threat. He's gotten some good subs early in his career, some guillotines, one in the PFL. But I'd still be surprised if he got Iwan Cutelaba out of there with a submission. Just doesn't, it wouldn't make as much sense as it did when it was Ryan Spann with that monstrous guillotine he has. Even though Felipe Lins is actually nicknamed Monstro, for whatever that's worth. But Felipe Lins, his biggest weakness is his chin. He's been TKO'd in 4 of his 5 losses, or 6 losses, I think, whatever he's got. One of them was an injury to this guy, Kelly Anitson, who's the guy that submitted Volkan Oezdemir in Bellator. But every other one of his losses via knockout is a knockout. Kleber Silva got him out of there in Bellator. TKO'd him. I saw that one. It was in round 2. Vadim Nemkov got him out of there in round 1. Excellent fighter. And Tanner Boser knocked him out in round 1, which is actually Iwan Cutelaba's most recent victory. His last win was a first-round knockout over Tanner Boser. Not that I'm doing MMA math here and that should play that big of a role, but I'm just mentioning the fact that that's what happened. But I still think Iwan Cutelaba, with no MMA math to be done, he's the more dangerous guy. And I think he's, despite being knocked out 3 times himself, the more healthy guy, the more durable guy with the better chin. He was knocked out by Magomed Ankalaev once and a half, call it twice. I think he was kind of faking it the first time, but whatever. He certainly was hurt at the very least. Certainly was knocked out in the rematch. And then he was knocked out by Ketelin Zechukwu in his last loss, I believe. That was the flying knee in round 2. Iwan, he's vulnerable himself, but I still think he's a little healthier than Philip Lins, and I do think for sure he's more dangerous. So I think this will be a violent fight, and he'll get it done early. But if I'm wrong, and these guys find themselves in rounds 2 and 3, I would think the guy more likely to be finished would be Iwan Cutelaba. Much more likely to be finished against Felipe Lins if they find themselves in that spot. But again, these guys are closely matched, and if neither guy does get finished and this goes the distance, I'd still slightly favor Iwan Cutelaba on the scorecards. So slight lean towards Cutelaba, even though the official pick is a knockout in round 1, which I guess means he steamrolls him. And I'll wait for the props because I do think Felipe Lins loses. It's his chin. And if Iwan Cutelaba loses, it could be a decision, but it would definitely be down the stretch. I don't think he would get taken out in round 1. I don't think Felipe Lins has that type of danger to do that. So I'll wait to see the props, but for now, the pick is Iwan Cutelaba. Round 1, knockout. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit. Check out my other videos.